Step away from the counter, ma'am. Open the bag, now. I'm not opening anything until you tell me what authority you're acting under. Sergeant Holt said. The deputy clerk wasn't moving fast enough to suit him. From where I stand, you look like someone who walked into a courthouse with something she doesn't want found. Captain Loretta Sims didn't blink. Deputy Holt leaned closer than courthouse procedure allowed, close enough that she could smell the gas station coffee on his breath. Open it before I call for backup, and we do this the hard way. What backup officers tightened around her as the line of morning visitors froze near the metal detectors. What none of them knew was that the woman they'd already decided to humiliate had spent 31 years learning exactly how to survive men like this, and that her silence in that lobby wasn't surrender. It was the first stone in the wall that was about to come down on top of them. Before we go further, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story will follow you for days. Loretta Sims walked into the Callaway County Justice Center at 7:52 in the morning, 8 minutes before her own swearing-in ceremony was scheduled to begin. She wore her good Navy suit, the one she'd had tailored 3 years ago, for her retirement party that never happened because she hadn't retired, she'd just gotten passed over one more time. In her left hand she carried a leather portfolio. In her right a sealed gray case the size of a briefcase, the kind with a combination lock and a tamper strip across the seam. Inside that case sat 11 years of internal affairs files that 2 different judges had tried to bury. Files that the outgoing chief judge had personally handed her 3 days earlier and said, "Somebody needs to finish what I couldn't." The lobby of the Justice Center smelled like floor wax and old paper. A janitor named Curtis was running a buffer over by the elevators. 2 attorneys stood near the coffee cart comparing calendars. Loretta had been a probation officer in this county for 26 years, had walked through these doors thousands of times, had testified in half these courtrooms, had watched judges retire and get appointed and get indicted. Today she was supposed to be sworn in as the new chief probation and court compliance officer for the 9th Judicial Circuit, the first black woman to hold the position in the county's history. Nobody in this lobby knew that. The appointment letter was still in her portfolio, signed 3 days ago, not yet posted on any bulletin board. She set her duffel near the wall and checked the time on the clock above the security checkpoint. The metal detector line moved slow on Tuesday mornings, always did, jury duty and traffic court stacking up at once. She kept the gray case against her hip, both hands near it without thinking about it, an old habit from years of carrying sealed files nobody was supposed to see before they were supposed to see them. That's when she noticed the deputy watching her. Young, white, built like he still played weekend football, badge reading T. Holt. He wasn't looking at the line. He was looking at her case. A second deputy walked over to him, said something low, and the 2 of them started toward her with the particular walk of men who'd already made up their minds about something. The second deputy's badge read SGT, R. Parati. He had the kind of smile that didn't reach anywhere near his eyes. "Morning, ma'am," Pratt said. "That's a secure case you're carrying." Loretta kept her voice even. "Personal items and court documents, Sergeant." "What kind of court documents would that be?" Holt asked. "No warmth in it at all." "Documents related to county business," Loretta said. "Is there a problem?" Pratt's smile widened just slightly. "The problem is, we got an alert this morning. Woman matching your description, unfamiliar face, locked case, moving like she didn't want anybody looking too close. You mind setting that case down and stepping aside?" "I do mind," Loretta said. "I haven't consented to a search, and I have business inside this building that starts in less than 10 minutes. Around them, the line near the metal detector started slowing further. A young mother shifted her toddler to her other hip and angled away. An older man in a VFW cap lowered his newspaper just enough to watch. "Are you saying I'm under suspicion of something specific, Sergeant?" Loretta asked. "Or is this simply because you don't recognize my face?" Holt's jaw tightened in a way that told her she'd landed closer to the truth than he wanted. "I'm saying you've got a locked case and you're being cagey about what's in it. That tends to get my attention." "I have not been cagey," Loretta said. "I told you exactly what is in it. Court documents and personal effects." "We'll be the judge of that," Pratt said, and reached for the case. Loretta pulled it back half a step, not far, but enough. That action sealed something in Holt's face. His hand moved to the strap of her duffel bag, and yanked it off her shoulder before she could stop him. The bag hit the marble floor and split open. A paperback novel, a tube of hand lotion, her reading glasses case, and a photograph of her late husband in his army uniform that slid across the polished floor and stopped near the feet of a stranger. "Look at that," Holt said, nudging her duffel with his boot. "Got somebody's whole life dumped out here and still won't open the case that matters." "That photograph belonged to my husband," Loretta said, bending toward it. "He's been dead 6 years. I'd ask you to step back from his memory." Holt's hand closed around her wrist before she'd even straightened up. Pain shot up through her shoulder, old arthritis flaring under the sudden twist. "Don't reach for anything until we clear it," he said, his grip tightening. "You're hurting me," Loretta said through her teeth. "Then stop resisting," Pratt said, stepping in close enough that his shadow fell over her. "This is assault," Loretta said, her voice still level even with her arm bent up behind her. "You have no legal grounds to detain me." "We've got every legal ground we need," Pratt said, loud enough now that it carried across the lobby. "This woman's refusing a lawful inspection and resisting officers. Cuff her." From a bench near the elevators, an elderly woman in a church hat rose slowly to her feet. "Officer," she called out, "that is not what I am seeing here." "Ma'am, please sit back down," Pratt called without even glancing her way. "This is an active situation." The cold metal of the handcuffs clicked shut around Loretta's wrists, the edges digging hard into skin that had thinned with age. Across the lobby, a teenager lifted his phone and started recording until his grandmother snatched it down out of his hand. Whispers ran through the line. "Probably drugs. Look how calm she's acting. That's not normal, that's suspicious in itself." Loretta said nothing more. She had learned that lesson decades ago, working juvenile intake in rooms exactly like this one, watching men in uniform decide who deserved patience and who deserved a knee on their back. She kept her spine straight and let them walk her past the coffee cart, past the metal detector, past every face that had decided her guilt before they'd heard a single fact. They took her into a windowless processing room behind the security office. Gray walls, one table, 3 chairs, a camera in the corner with no red light glowing. Pratt closed the door himself. "Big Shot thought she could just stroll through here like she owns the place," Holt said, dropping into the chair across from her. "I have never claimed to own anything in this building," Loretta said. "I have only asked to be treated according to the law." "Here's how this works," Pratt said, pulling out a notepad more for show than function. "You sign a statement saying this was confusion on your part. We let you go with a warning about non-compliance, and none of this follows you out the door. Or we go the other way, obstruction, resisting, and we find out exactly what's locked in that case of yours, which, by the look of it, isn't going to help your case any." Loretta said nothing. "Silence isn't going to save you," Pratt said. "It isn't meant to," Loretta said quietly. "It's meant to outlast you." Pratt's eye twitched, just slightly. He stood, crossed to where her confiscated items sat piled on the corner table, and picked up the leather portfolio she'd been carrying. He flipped it open, expecting nothing more than receipts or grocery lists. What he found instead drained the color from his face in real time. Official letterhead from the Office of the Chief Judge, 9th Judicial Circuit, a gold-embossed seal, an appointment order, signed and dated 3 days prior, naming Loretta Annette Sims as Chief Probation and Court Compliance Officer, effective that very morning. "No," Pratt said softly, reading it twice. Holt leaned over his shoulder, and his cocky expression melted off his face like wax too close to a flame. That's gotta be fake," Holt said, though his voice had lost every bit of its earlier swagger. "It is not fake," Loretta said, her voice steady as stone. "I am the woman your office was supposed to welcome this morning. Instead, you searched my belongings without cause, twisted my arm hard enough to bruise, and accused me, in front of a room full of strangers, of being a criminal." The room went silent except for the buzz of the overhead light. "Ma'am," Pratt stammered. "This was a misunderstanding. We got an alert. We were following protocol." "Pull up that alert," Loretta said. "Now." Pratt's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "System's running slow this morning," he said. "Maintenance window. I know stalling when I hear it, Sergeant. I spent 26 years listening to people stall in rooms exactly like this one." He typed at last, and the screen blinked up a suspicious person alert. Black female, 60s, unfamiliar to staff, carrying a locked case, possible concealment of contraband. Entered at 7:31 that morning under Sergeant Pratt's own login. Loretta studied the timestamp and felt her stomach go tight. That entry was logged 21 minutes before I even walked through the front doors. That's not. I wasn't even at this desk at 7:31, Pratt said quickly. Someone must have used my credentials. Who knew I'd be carrying a locked case, Loretta asked, and the question hung in the room like smoke that wouldn't clear. Holt's eyes darted toward Pratt. Cole, he said, his voice cracking, you told me this morning we had somebody coming in with a sealed case. You called it in yourself. Shut up, Brian, Pratt snapped. You said it was routine, Holt pressed, panic rising in his voice now. You said she'd look suspicious. How'd you know that before she even got here? Before Pratt could answer, the door swung open without a knock. A man in a gray suit walked in like he'd built the building with his own hands, 2 paper coffee cups balanced in one hand. His name badge read Canny Administrator, D. Asixford. Chief Sims, he said, extending one of the cups toward her with a smile that didn't waver. Rough morning. Thought you could use this. Loretta did not reach for it. She stood by the small window overlooking the parking lot, watching the morning sun catch the rows of county vehicles. Her wrist throbbed where the cuffs had bitten in. Mr. Ashford, you're here early. Word travels fast, he said, setting both cups on the table and lowering himself into a chair like an old friend dropping by. These things happen. New face, busy lobby, everybody's a little on edge during a leadership transition. Nobody's fault, really. It was not a misunderstanding, Loretta said. His smile flickered, just barely. Poor choice of words on my part. What I mean is, we can frame this the right way before it spirals into something nobody wants. A simple miscommunication between 2 dedicated officers and a new chief who hadn't yet been introduced to staff. Everyone shakes hands. We move forward. They entered a false alert under a stolen login, Loretta said. They searched my belongings without consent. They handcuffed me in a public lobby in front of half this county. Allegedly, Ashford said, still smiling. I'm sure it felt very real to you in the moment. But memory shifts under stress, Chief Sims. Perception isn't always. Are you calling me a liar, Mr. Ashford? Lord, no, he said, raising both hands. I'm only saying that how we present this to the public matters a great deal. The county's bond rating review is in 5 weeks. The new courthouse annex depends on that funding. Do we really want to torpedo all of that over one unfortunate lobby encounter? Unfortunate, Loretta repeated, tasting the word like something gone sour. That's what you're calling it? What would you call it? Criminal, Loretta said. The warmth finally drained out of his face. He set his coffee down, slow and deliberate. Let me paint you a picture then, Chief Sims. County Council reviews this matter and finds a brand new chief who arrived without identifying herself properly, who resisted reasonable questioning, and who is now alleging persecution after standard security procedures were followed. Some might say you provoked the entire incident to build sympathy for whatever reforms you were already planning. That's not what happened, isn't it? Because from where I sit, it looks like a woman manufacturing a headline on her very first morning. He buttoned his jacket and moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. The officers made an error in judgment. They'll be counseled, retrained quietly. But if you push this publicly, the only person who gets burned is you. They're suspended pending investigation, Loretta said. No, they are not, Ashford said without turning around. Check your email. Acting Judge Whitlow rescinded any such order an hour ago. Deputies Holt and Pratt remain on active duty pending a full review, which, given our backlog, could take quite some time. The door clicked shut behind him. Loretta stood alone in the gray room, the 2 coffees steaming untouched on the table. She thought of every wall in this building, every camera, every officer who would choose loyalty to a broken system over the truth standing right in front of them. She walked over to the duty roster taped beside the door. Names in neat black print. Pratt and Holt still listed, still active, still protected. She found a pen on the table and circled both their names. Then we begin, she said quietly to the empty room, before they know I've already started. By that afternoon, Loretta sat in the borrowed office that was technically hers, though she hadn't unpacked a single box yet. The county had given her a desk in a converted storage room down the hall from records, the kind of placement meant to remind a new chief exactly how much she wasn't wanted. She didn't mind. It put her 2 doors down from a man she needed. Retired Detective Marcus Quinn had spent 29 years with the county sheriff's department before they'd quietly moved him to property records 3 years back, after he'd refused to alter a report about missing evidence. He was 61 now, still working part-time as a records consultant, gray-bearded, sharp-eyed in a way that made people nervous when they lied around him. "Heard you caused quite a stir downstairs this morning," he said, leaning in her doorway. "Heard you caused one of your own a few years back," Loretta said. "A different kind of stir," he said. "Mine was quieter. Career-ending, but quieter." "Tell me about the missing property complaints, Detective." His face shifted, something old and tired moving across it. "You sure you want to open that particular file cabinet, Chief?" "I'm sure. They arrested me this morning in front of half the courthouse, tried to bury evidence I was carrying before they even knew what it was. So yes, I want every box opened that they've spent years hoping would stay closed." Quinn studied her a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Started about 2 years back. Travelers and visitors filing complaints. Court visitors, mostly, people coming in for hearings with cash for fines, jewelry pawned for bail money, sometimes just personal valuables in a bag. Property would go missing during so-called security screenings. Complaints filed, then mysteriously lost. How many? Officially, maybe a dozen made it to paper," Quinn said. "Unofficially, I kept copies before they shuffled me down to records." He pushed off the doorframe. "But Chief, these files have a way of disappearing. I've watched entire boxes walk out of evidence storage and never come back." "Then we move fast," Loretta said. An hour later, Quinn wheeled a metal cart into her office, 3 bankers' boxes thick with dust resting on top. "This is only what they forgot to destroy," he said. They spent that afternoon in the converted storage room going through complaint after complaint. A widow's wedding ring, gone during a bag check before a custody hearing. An elderly veteran's disability back pay, $1,100 in cash, vanished during a pat-down he never should have needed. A young mother's grocery money, taken during a routine metal detector stop and never logged anywhere. Then Quinn pulled a folder marked with a small cross drawn in the corner. "This one," he said quietly. "This one still gets me." Inside sat the complaint of a woman named Odessa Marsh, 68 years old, the financial secretary of Bethel Grace AM Church. She'd come to the courthouse to pay a building permit fee for the church's new fellowship hall, carrying $9,400, raised over 2 years of fish fries, car washes, and Sunday offerings. Deputies Pratt and Holt had detained her for nearly 3 hours, claimed her cash looked suspicious, and laughed when she showed them the church's letterhead and the building permit application. The money had vanished into so-called evidence and never came back. Her complaint had been marked resolved, no wrongdoing found. That afternoon they drove out to Odessa Marsh's small brick house on Cherry Hollow Road. A statue of the Blessed Mother stood in the front garden among rosebushes that needed pruning. Odessa answered on the second knock, a small woman with silver-gray locks pinned back neat, eyes going wide at the sight of a uniform on her porch. "I told everything 2 years ago," she said, her hand tightening on the door. "Nobody listened then." "I'm listening now," Loretta said, and something in her voice made Odessa step back and let them in. The living room held a lifetime of photographs, grandchildren in graduation gowns, church groups on mission trips, a worn Bible open on the coffee table. Odessa brought sweet tea on a tray with hands that shook just slightly, and told her story slow and steady, the way a woman tells something she has rehearsed in her own mind 1,000 times trying to make sense of it. "They counted my money out real slow, like they were already spending it themselves," Odessa said. "Said it was suspicious for a black woman my age to be carrying so much cash. Asked if I was a mule. Me. I've taught Sunday school since before either of them was born." "What happened to the money?" Loretta asked, though she already knew the shape of the answer. "Called evidence," Odessa said. "I called every week for 6 months asking after it. Finally somebody told me to stop calling or face charges myself." She crossed to an old writing desk and pulled out an envelope worn soft from handling. "This held that money," she said. "Every fish fry, every car wash, every dollar bill counted by children after Sunday service." She handed it over. "They call it evidence. We both know what it really was." "Theft," Loretta said, holding the empty envelope like something sacred. "I'm reopening this case, Mrs. Marsh." "Don't make promises you can't keep," Odessa said. "You're a kind woman, Chief Sims. I can see that plainly. But men like that have protection. They made me feel like a criminal in my own county courthouse. Made me afraid to even drive past that building." "Then I'll make sure there are consequences," Loretta said. "You really believe you can," Odessa said. I do, because they tried the very same thing to me this morning. Something passed between the two women then, the particular understanding of people who'd both been made small in rooms built to protect them. That evening, Quinn's phone buzzed with a local news alert. A reporter from Channel 4 had picked up a statement from Sergeant Pratt, recorded in front of the courthouse steps in his dress uniform. Being persecuted by a chief with a personal grudge, Pratt said into the camera, "Officer Holt and I followed protocol with a suspicious individual this morning. Now she's dragging two good officers through the mud to push her own agenda before she's even unpacked her office." Quinn lowered the phone. "He's going on offense." "Good," Loretta said. "Angry men make mistakes. They also burn careers down to the ground," Quinn said. "Then we make sure we light the right one first," Loretta said. "Tomorrow we have Odessa Marsh tell her story. Let's see whose truth carries more weight." The following morning brought retired schoolteacher Yvette Carrington to Loretta's office door, 70 years old, spine straight as a yardstick, a leather handbag clutched in both hands, and the kind of presence that had once made unruly sixth-graders fall silent mid-sentence. "I taught for 38 years, Mrs. Carrington said, settling into the chair across from Loretta without waiting to be invited. "You learn to watch everything in a classroom. Reflections in windows. Hands that move when they think nobody's looking. I started recording on my phone the moment that deputy raised his voice at you in the lobby yesterday." She set the phone on the desk and played the footage. Shaky in places but unmistakable. Holt's grip on Loretta's wrist, the duffel bag spilling across the marble floor, Pratt's voice carrying across the room as he announced an arrest for the cameras of strangers. But near the end, Yvette leaned forward and pointed at a reflection, caught faintly in the glass partition behind the security desk. "Watch there," she said. "What you can't see straight on, sometimes you catch it sideways." In the dim reflection, Pratt's hand dipped briefly into Loretta's gray case, while Holt's body blocked the direct line of sight, then withdrew and disappeared into his jacket pocket. "He stole something while pretending to secure evidence," Loretta said quietly. "I taught algebra for 20 years before they let me near the advanced classes," Yvette said. "You learn that angles matter." That same afternoon, Quinn traced the building's access logs and found that Pratt had entered the secure evidence room at 3:47 that morning, 4 hours after the chief judge's office had quietly issued a suspension order that someone above Pratt's pay grade had apparently chosen to ignore. "He had help," Loretta said, studying the timestamp. "Someone either disabled the alert system or someone high enough up made sure alerts didn't matter that night." A trembling call came in just after lunch from a man named Felix Ortega, a longtime maintenance worker at the Justice Center. Felix met them in the parking garage that afternoon, keys rattling in his nervous hands. "I got 3 kids, Chief," he said. "This job is everything I got. Nobody's coming after your job, Felix." "They told me that before," he said, "when I asked about the old records corridor. 6 months back, I saw Sergeant Pratt and Deputy Holt down there middle of my shift, carrying clear evidence bags, not logging a thing. I asked if they needed help carrying anything. Pratt told me I hadn't seen what I thought I saw, and that if I wanted to keep seeing my paycheck, I'd forget about it." Felix led them through a service corridor that smelled of old concrete and machine oil, down to a row of decommissioned storage lockers, behind a rusted gate that screamed on its hinges when he forced it open. Heavy padlocks, new metal on old doors. Bolt cutters and a forensic team arrived within the hour, and Loretta photographed everything herself before a single lock came off. Fresh footprints in the dust, a cigarette butt of the brand she'd bet her badge belonged to Holt. The first locker held watches, dozens of them, some still bearing luggage tags and pawn tickets. The second held jewelry sealed in evidence bags with dates but no case numbers attached. The third made her chest go tight, bundles of cash sorted by denomination, and tucked among them, a Manila church envelope marked Bethel Grace Building Fund in Odessa Marsh's careful handwriting. $9,400, Loretta said softly. "For a fellowship hall roof." "How much total?" Quinn asked. "Hundreds of thousands, easy," Loretta said, feeling sick and furious in equal measure. "Every single item here is a person, a story, a violation nobody answered for. Federal warrant came through by evening, signed by a circuit judge who'd had no patience left for Ashford's office. The forensic team cataloged everything by the book, every chain of custody form filled out twice, leaving no room for any defense attorney to cry foul later." Loretta held Odessa's envelope in gloved hands like it might dissolve if she gripped it too hard. Her phone rang as the last locker was sealed for transport. Ashford, his voice tight. "Chief Sims, I'm hearing about an unauthorized search." "Fully authorized," Loretta said. "Judge Whitlow signed the warrant 2 hours ago." Silence on the line, then, carefully, "What exactly did you find?" "The truth, Mr. Ashford. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, I'll be holding a press conference on the courthouse steps." "That would be unwise," he said. "Wisdom is knowing when to stop negotiating with thieves," Loretta said and ended the call. She did not sleep that night. Before dawn touched the windows, she drove to the courthouse with her notes for the press conference, rehearsed a dozen times in her head. Quinn was already waiting by the secure evidence room, his face telling her everything before he said a word. "Don't tell me," she said. "It's gone," Quinn said. "All of it. The lockers, Odessa's envelope, every box." The access log, when he pulled it up, showed her own command code unlocking the storage room at 3:47 that morning. "I was home asleep at 3:47, Loretta said. "I know that," Quinn said, "but the system says otherwise." Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Ashford appeared flanked by 2 attorneys from county council, their faces arranged into careful, practiced concern. "Chief Sims," one of the attorneys said, "a woman with eyes like a closed door. You're being placed on administrative leave, pending an investigation into evidence that disappeared from a secure facility under your command code." "I did not take that evidence," Loretta said. "The logs say otherwise," Ashford said, his earlier warmth nowhere in sight now. "Please surrender your badge and credentials." She unclipped the badge from her jacket and set it on the desk like it weighed far more than metal should. The walk past the front desk felt endless. Deputies watching from doorways, some looking ashamed, others satisfied that the new chief had been put back in her place before the week was even out. Outside, a single news van had already arrived, drawn by some leak about missing evidence that conveniently left out exactly who Loretta Sims actually was. That evening, a voicemail came through from a number she almost let ring out. Odessa Marsh's voice filled her car, steady and stronger than Loretta had ever heard it. "Chief Sims, I don't know what they did to you today, but I know what they did to me, and I am done being afraid. You come by when you're ready. I'll have coffee on." And Loretta drove there instead of going home. By the next afternoon, Odessa's small living room had filled with women Loretta hadn't met yet. A young hospital aide whose grandmother's brooch had vanished during a courthouse screening, an immigrant grandmother clutching a manila envelope of her own, holding receipts for medication confiscated and never returned. Yvette Carrington arrived with an old church directory thick with phone numbers, working the room like a campaign manager who'd been waiting her whole retirement for exactly this kind of fight. "Authority is not the same as truth," Odessa told her, pouring coffee from a percolator older than Loretta's career. "You lost your badge yesterday. You did not lose being right." By evening, Felix returned, hat in his hands, shame written plain across his face. "I lied when I backed off my statement," he admitted. "They threatened my job, my insurance. But what they did to you and Mrs. Marsh, it isn't right, and I can't keep pretending I didn't see it. There's something else," he added. "That old records corridor's got a separate freight camera system. Different department, different server entirely. Runs on cargo tracking infrastructure from before the courthouse annex went up. Most folks forgot it even exists." Quinn sat up straight. "Court security doesn't control those cameras?" "No, sir," Felix said. "If those two were moving stolen property through there, the footage might still be sitting on that old server, untouched." Quinn called in a favor that night, a federal inspector named Renata Voss, who'd once owed him from an old case, who agreed to drive in before sunrise to authenticate whatever they found. The freight control room sat 3 levels below the courthouse, forgotten equipment, humming behind a steel door that took 2 key cards and a maintenance override code to open. Inspector Voss, compact and sharp-eyed, watched the grainy black-and-white footage roll backward through the weeks with a kind of patience that made corrupt men nervous. "There," Quinn said, pointing. "Movement on the left." 2 figures hauled dark bags through the corridor days after Loretta's suspension, unmistakably Pratt and Holt, loading items into a maintenance cart and wheeling them away. They scrolled further back, finding more of the same across months, and then Felix stopped the playback cold. "Wait," he said. "Go back to that timestamp. 2 nights before you even started, Chief." The corridor sat empty for long minutes, then three figures entered the frame. Pratt and Holt, and a third man whose silhouette made Loretta's breath catch in her throat. County Administrator Dale Ashford. "I knew it," Quinn muttered. On screen, Ashford walked the restricted corridor like he'd built it himself, inspecting the open lockers while Pratt held items up for his approval. He selected several pieces, slipping them into his jacket, then handed Pratt a thick envelope in return. "He's not covering a scandal," Loretta said slowly. "He's running an operation." Inspector Voss finished copying the footage onto 3 separate drives before sunrise. "I'll have federal prosecutors on the phone within the hour," she said. "Organized theft, civil rights violations, public corruption. This is not a small case, Chief Sim." A formal notice arrived that same morning. An emergency county commission session, called for 9 o'clock, public testimony invited on the matter of Chief Sims's alleged misconduct. Ashford intended to end her career on live television before the federal case could even surface. "Let him try," Loretta said. The commission chambers filled fast that morning, news crews lining the walls, deputies splitting into visible factions along the back rows. Loretta entered through a side door in her dress uniform, the bruise on her wrist hidden beneath her sleeve, but throbbing all the same, a thin folder tucked under one arm. Ashford opened the session with practiced concern, painting a portrait of a new chief who'd arrived with an agenda, suspended good officers without cause, and lost critical evidence under her own command code within 72 hours of taking office. Pratt and Holt sat near the front in civilian suits, an attorney positioned between them like a shield, nodding along as the story took shape exactly as they'd hoped. "Captain Sims, you may respond," Ashford said, his tone suggesting he expected silence or excuses. Loretta rose, walked to the podium, and set a small remote on its surface. "Before addressing these allegations," she said, her voice carrying clear and steady through the chamber, "I'd like the commission to see something a private citizen recorded on my very first morning in this county." The screens dropped from the ceiling. Yvette Carrington's footage filled them, Holt's grip on her wrist, the duffel spilling open, Pratt's voice booming across the lobby announcing an arrest while strangers watched and judged. The chamber went still, several deputies looking away from the screens entirely. "That footage proves nothing," Pratt's attorney called out. "Officers acted on reasonable suspicion." "Perhaps," Loretta said. "Let's hear directly from the people your officers have been investigating for 2 years." Odessa Marsh rose slowly from the back row, leaning on her cane, and told the chamber about $9,400 raised through fish fries and car washes, about an empty envelope handed back to her like an insult. 2 more victims stood after her, each story following the same pattern. Vulnerable people targeted, property seized, complaints buried. "These are unsubstantiated," Ashford tried, but his voice had lost its earlier polish. "Are they?" Loretta said, and pressed the remote again. Detective Quinn's recorded statement filled the screen, followed by the freight corridor footage. Pratt and Holt hauling stolen property through the abandoned corridor, and then, unmistakably, Dale Ashford walking through frame, selecting items for his own pockets, handing over a thick envelope in return. The chamber erupted. Reporters surged forward. Camera flashes exploded across the room like gunfire. "Turn off those screens," Ashford shouted, his composure finally cracking wide open. "This footage has clearly been doctored." The chamber doors burst open. Federal agents moved in with practiced speed, badges swinging from lanyards. Pratt shoved past startled spectators toward the side exit, only to find Quinn, 61 years old, moving slower than the younger agents but perfectly positioned, blocking the narrow aisle. "Going somewhere, Cole," Quinn said quietly. "Get out of my way, old man." Sergeant Cole Pratt, a federal agent, announced, stepping in behind him. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, theft of evidence, and obstruction of justice." Holt bolted for the main doors, shoving through the crowd until Inspector Voss stepped calmly into his path in the marble hallway outside. He tried to bull past her using his size. She sidestepped, twisted his wrist behind his back with textbook precision, and put him face down on the cold floor before he understood what had happened. Back inside the chamber, Ashford stood frozen behind the dais as Inspector Voss approached him directly, her voice carrying to every reporter in the room. "County Administrator Dale Ashford, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit theft, and protection of a criminal enterprise. You have no authority to arrest an elected official without. We have footage of you on restricted county property selecting stolen goods for yourself, Voss said. We have financial records and witness testimony to match. You can surrender voluntarily, or we do this in front of every camera in this room. Ashford's eyes searched the chamber for allies who'd suddenly become very interested in their own notebooks. He extended his wrists without another word. By that afternoon, the chief judge had accepted Ashford's resignation paperwork, along with a quiet admission that complaints against Pratt and Holt had been buried for years under his watch. The deputies' union withdrew every statement of support within the hour, claiming they'd never truly vouched for either man. Loretta's suspension was formally lifted, every disciplinary mark vacated, full authority restored before sundown. 2 weeks later, the lobby of the Callaway County Justice Center had been rearranged for a ceremony. Folding chairs set in rows near the very spot where Loretta had been handcuffed in front of strangers. She had requested that exact location herself. She arrived in her dress uniform beside her younger sister, who leaned lightly on a cane of her own and looked at Loretta with the particular pride of someone who had watched their family fight for decades to be seen as fully human in rooms just like this one. "You look like our mother in that uniform," her sister said quietly. "She'd tell me the real work starts tomorrow," Loretta said. "That's exactly what she'd say," her sister answered. Odessa Marsh arrived in a burgundy dress, the same purse she'd carried the day Pratt and Holt detained her tucked under one arm, the empty fundraiser envelope still inside as proof of what had once been stolen. Inspector Voss stepped forward with a fresh manila envelope, holding $9,400 in crisp replacement bills. "Mrs. Marsh," Voss said formally, "on behalf of this investigation I return what was unlawfully taken from you." Odessa counted every bill with the precision of a woman who had managed church finances for 2 decades, and when she finished, tears slid freely down her face. "I stopped driving past this courthouse after what they did to me," she said into the microphone someone held toward her. "Today, I know I was never the one who should have been ashamed." Yvette Carrington received recognition next for the footage that had cracked the case wide open, and Felix Ortega was offered a new permanent role as a compliance liaison, his courage formally protected under an expanded whistleblower policy the county commission passed within the week. Detective Quinn's Integrity Review Unit was granted independent authority to investigate complaints against the Courthouse Security Division, reporting directly to federal oversight rather than local command. Finally, Loretta stepped forward to take her oath again, this time with no rescinded orders waiting in anyone's inbox. "Do you solemnly swear to faithfully execute the duties of Chief Probation and Court Compliance Officer, and to preserve and protect the rights of every person who walks through these doors, regardless of race, age, or station?" "I do," Loretta said, her voice carrying clean across the lobby. The applause that followed wasn't polite or political. It came from courthouse janitors and church mothers, and a retired schoolteacher who had never once enjoyed being the center of attention but understood exactly why her phone had mattered that morning. As the crowd began to thin, a little girl in pigtails broke away from her mother's hand and walked straight up to Loretta, studying the gold bars on her shoulder with open curiosity. "Are you the boss now?" the girl asked. Loretta knelt down slowly, bringing herself level with the child's eyes, while behind her workers were already screwing a new nameplate into the wall that read Chief Lorette Sims, Integrity, Surface, Accountability. "Yes, sweetheart," Loretta said, smiling for the first time in 2 weeks like she meant it all the way through. "Today I am."